Welcome, listeners and viewers, to a special bonus episode of Dudes of the Dead podcast. We thought we would start a new series, a special type of bonus episode called our Thrilling Theater episodes, where we go see a film in the theater and drive right back here and tell you our thoughts.
Which is what we just did. And thanks to Maniac for some dark matter.
Yeah, cheers. It was very difficult. It's Immaculate. That's right. It is Immaculate beer. So we drove in the same car both ways, and we had the willpower to not say a word about this film.
Correct.
So we have no idea how the other felt. If you missed it, this is for the new 2024 film Immaculate. This is directed by Michael Mohan and starring Sydney Sweeney as Sister Cecilia. Some good alliteration there.
Sibilants.
Alvaro Morte as Father Dideshi. I recognize him from the Wheel of Time series. And the premise is Cecilia, a woman of devout faith, is warmly welcomed to the picture-perfect Italian countryside where she is offered a new role at an illustrious convent. But it becomes clear to Cecilia that her new home harbors dark and horrifying secrets.
Dun, dun, dun.
And I guess...
I know God saved me for a reason, but I guess I'm still searching for what that reason is. Too much blood of Christ.
It's a miracle. And I guess Sydney Sweeney was really critical in getting this film off the ground. She had auditioned for the role. The film was supposed to be made in 2014.
Oh, wow.
And it fell apart. But she revived the project. She became a producer. She acquired the script and made some alterations and found a new director. So I guess she really believed in this film.
Yeah, no kidding.
And so we're going to start with no spoilers.
Correct.
So if you've not seen the film, you're good. We're just going to tell you what we thought about it, but then we will go into full spoilers for those who've already seen it or want to hear spoilers.
And if you could, if you're listening to this, not just watching it on YouTube, let us know what you think about Maniac's microphone, because we made a little change, and I actually really like your microphone.
I like it too. Yeah, it sounds good so far.
It seems a little more robust.
Does seem more robust
than your other ones. I'm actually a little jealous of that microphone, but I do like mine, so I can't covet yours.
Speaking of robust, 2024 has really not been robust when it comes to new 2024 horror releases. So this, I think, for both of us, was our first horror film of 2024 that we'd seen.
Yes,
we've watched other horror films, of course. I've watched
theaters,
the whole Halloween series, and you've watched a bunch of stuff. But in terms of releases, this was the first one. And
indeed,
were you disappointed?
Disappointed might be a strong word. I think I had maybe seen weeks ago or a month ago or something. I'd seen one preview. I deliberately didn't refresh my mind. I think the preview that I saw was just a dialogue thing. It really didn't give away anything else.
I knew the very basic premise that we're in a convent, there's a nun character, and that's basically all I knew.
That's about all I knew, too.
I just knew it was getting a bit of buzz, so I was excited to finally see a 2024 horror film.
No spoilers, but what I might say is that if you're a thoughtful person, the title might give you some clues as to what might be going on in the
I was curious what they were going to do with the title.
Yeah.
A quick aside. So we did our review of Saw 10 with Jay of the Dead on Jay of the Dead's new horror movies. And Ron Martin made a lot of criticisms of that film. But one of the ones was he said, they were in Mexico and they never spoke Spanish. And that didn't bother me at the time. But I have to say, I do appreciate when they're in Italy and they actually speak Italian and they have subtitles. And, it's not people with British accents or whatever. So...
That is, I mean, there's an authenticity there for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
That's just something I noticed right off the bat, and I was curious going into it to see what they would do with that. And if you hate subtitles, it's not the entire movie.
No, not at all.
And they explain reasons why people might be speaking English, but I do appreciate the attention to detail and that, we're in Italy, and most Italians don't run around talking English, so.
Okay, so coming back to your question about, because I didn't really know what to expect, I went in with few expectations about what to expect. There were definitely things that I liked about the film. And I'm trying to put this together without giving away.
It's a bit tricky.
Yeah, without giving away anything, but also just trying to wrap my head around, okay, what did I we haven't had a lot of time to kind of formulate. I liked some of the sound design.
Me too.
Some of the music was good.
The score was really good.
Yeah. Unlike a lot of movies, unlike a lot of movies that have dark scenes in them, which this one did, I found there was enough light that it didn't irk me, or I wasn't struggling to see what was going on. What was important, you could see.
Agreed.
And because that always bugs me, not just in horror films, but in films in general. If there's a lot of dark scenes and I can't figure out what's going on, then it kind of bugs me. Okay, so like the sound design, I really liked some of the camera angles that they chose in the film. Either, a high angle or a low angle to kind of emphasize the action that was going on.
And the scenery, I thought, like whether it was indoor, because there's kind of like beautiful cathedrals and also the Italian countryside. So I think they did a really good job of utilizing shots that highlighted the scenery. It's quite a picturesque film.
Absolutely. And it's a nice, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a nice contrast to what's going on in the story.
Mm-hmm.
I think the beauty of the scenery is contrasted against some of the elements of the story.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. They structure the film. I won't say how they do it, but in 3 acts.
Yes.
With a particular theme, which we won't spoil.
Yeah.
So for me, I really liked the movie at the beginning. I was impressed, as you say, like the sound design, the cinematography, the lighting, the acting. I was like, oh, this is good. And then the first act started to go downhill a bit for me. And they're like, they're doing some of the typical, like, this is a horror movie checklist.
Yeah.
We're going to do the jump scares, and we're going to do
too many jump scares for me. Yeah.
Just, this is a cookie cutter horror film.
Yeah.
But then in the second act, it kind of takes a turn and gets pretty intriguing, and also kind of ramps up some body horror, which really got my attention and got me quite invested. And then I was like, okay, it's going to come down to the ending. And I think this is one of the best horror endings I've ever seen. I loved the ending, but I could see the ending being contentious. Did you like the ending?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I liked the fact that they didn't pull any punches at the end. Like they didn't give you some kind of weird out or, whatever. And yeah, I did appreciate that.
Because so many horror films, I feel like it's good all the way through, and sometimes they
Yes.
don't stick the landing. This one absolutely sticks the landing. So ultimately, I come out positive, but there was a time there in the first third of the film where I was like, I don't know if I'm liking this. Like, this is pretty mediocre. And it kind of redeemed itself as time went on for me.
Yeah, I would say generally, overall, I'm positive about the film. I think I went through, maybe not exactly at the same time, but I definitely went through a bit of a slump in the middle. And we were not chatting, but we mentioned coming out of the theater, it was just barely 90 minutes. I think just over 90, because we went in at 6:40 and we came out about 8:12 or something.
And I know you and I are a bit different this way, that you really don't like longer films.
Yeah, it's not my favorite. Yeah.
Did you feel like this film was long enough to kind of develop what it needed to develop and execute on what it needed to do?
Yeah, if anything, and I'm not suggesting they could have cut anything, but there were some scenes that I thought, do we need this? Like, is this going on too long? So it might have even been a tad bit shorter, not a lot,
Right.
But like, let's just say for the sake of argument, it was 92 minutes. It could have been 87 or whatever. Like, I think there were some things that maybe just stretched a little bit.
Whereas I was left feeling that maybe some things could have been explained a little bit further. So maybe they could have dove
fair.
into a few things, and maybe some of the characters could have been a little bit developed. So it almost felt a bit rushed to me. But I know you and I have different, like, one of your common complaints of films sometimes is the runtime. So I was curious how you felt about that.
But I will agree with you that there were some things that I thought, I wish they had given me more of that, or at least, because there are some elements maybe we'll get into in the spoilers that I felt maybe weren't explained enough. And it's like, where is that coming from? Like, how did they get there? Or how did they? So I think there could have been some spots where they added some backstory so that you kind of felt, I mean, did you feel like, so the opening segment,
Yep.
did you feel by the time you got to the third act to the film that you understood what was happening in the beginning?
Mostly. I still have a few questions, though.
Yeah, because that's kind of how I felt as well.
Yeah.
And I felt there was, I guess we'll get to it in spoilers, but there was one element of the film that I'm still not sure
I wonder if it's the same for me because I also
Okay.
do. And I also feel like that maybe there's a bit of discordance between what the film ends up being and what they maybe pitch it as early on. And I
Yeah.
don't know if they ever quite tie everything
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting one. Also, it's just not the type of horror movie that I was expecting, but I won't say more about that until afterwards. But
Okay. So, sorry, go ahead.
well, yeah, I just think it's a spoiler, but this is not for when I read the premise. I didn't know much about the film, but when I went in thinking this would be as a horror film, it was very different.
Yeah.
But almost in a good way. I was actually pleasantly surprised because it took me on more of a wild ride than I was expecting.
Yeah. And having seen, The Nun 2, which was, yeah.
I avoided that one.
I took one for the team on that
did.
one. But having seen that one, and there was another one I'm trying to remember the name of. It wasn't a big name.
The Nun?
No, it was similar. It was set in a convent, and I don't want to give any spoilers, but the storyline was very similar
To this one?
Yes,
Oh, interesting.
very similar. But some significant differences in how they resolved that storyline.
Yeah.
So are we? How much do you want to go into before we just give a recommendation and go into spoilers? Because
Yeah, not too much. I do think this maybe takes a bit of a shotgun approach in terms of the type of horror response it's trying to elicit. Like it kind of tries all the tricks in the book, especially in the first act. Like every type of way you can scare an audience, I feel like they try to go through
Right,
all of
right.
them. And then I think, just as a warning, I think the film lands and executes and lives more in the body horror
Yeah, that's fair.
by the end. And so
Yeah.
if you're squeamish, like there's definitely some pretty
yeah,
extreme body horror in this, which I wasn't necessarily expecting.
I didn't expect that at all.
Yeah. So I think my biggest complaint is that the first act just feels a bit unfocused. But I think the whole time, even when I was like, I'm not buying this as a horror movie, the whole time I was impressed by the technical elements. Like, I think it's elevated by the sound design, the score,
Right,
the cinematography,
right.
the lighting, like the different shots they
Yeah.
use. Like it's beautiful. Her performance is great.
Yeah, she's really good.
Yeah. So everything is very well done. And then to me, in the end, it delivered.
Okay, good.
So I guess, do you recommend this film and do you recommend people go see this in theaters?
I don't know that it's necessarily a theater watch. I mean, my own barometer is kind of like with big ticket things, like space films or maybe action films or whatever. Sometimes those are better in a theater environment. I don't know that you couldn't enjoy this one on a 75-inch television, for example.
That's right. Yeah, no, I think I mostly agree. Like, yes, it's quite picturesque.
Yes.
There's some nice cinematography, so that might be enhanced in a theater. I think if you're a horror fan and you've just been starved for something worthwhile to go see, if Night Swim or whatever didn't do it for you, then this I think is a solid, like if you want to go to the theater and watch a horror movie, I think there's good things here. And I think it's worth the money. So if you're like, I just want to go see a horror movie, I think you can go see this one and it's
Agreed.
worthwhile.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. I don't think it's worth running out to see in theaters either. I think you can wait.
Yeah, if you're not dying for a theater experience, then I think you could stream this or do whatever, especially if you have a decent, television and stuff at home. But if you're starved for some horror action, then I think this would be a good one.
Which it might be in 2024. So yeah, I think you can confidently go see this one and you'll get some out of it.
So it's 2 thumbs up?
Yeah, I would give, in the middle, I was like, thumbs middle. With the ending, it's a thumbs up.
I think it's solid.
Me too.
It didn't blow my socks off, but it's solid. It's well
like above
done.
average?
Yeah, above average.
But not amazing. It's not Hereditary or anything,
Exactly,
but it's
exactly.
above average.
Yeah, agreed.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. So we have the same thoughts. Spoilers?
Spoilers.
Where do we start?
Where do we start?
Maybe expectations.
Okay, so I wondered. Okay, so first of all, let me come back to the hooded figures with the red on their faces. Did you have any understanding of what that, like, are they supposed to be?
That's where I think my biggest complaint comes is I feel like you have two things going on and maybe we should just,
This is spoilers, by the way.
Yeah.
Spoilers.
When I
Okay.
see nuns and Catholic priests and monasteries and whatever, I expect there's something supernatural. So I was waiting for demonic possession, ghosts, like evil things. And you find out it's actually more of a science-based horror.
Yes, but is it? So I'm still confused by like how did they impregnate her?
Okay, yeah. So this is where I think some of the confusion lies. And this is where I feel like more time could have been given to explain.
Me too. Yeah.
But he basically, so the guy, what's the guy's name? Father. Sorry.
Just Padre. That's all you need to call him.
Father Dideshi. So he explains at the beginning, he's like, oh, I used to be in biology, and then I wasn't finding anything useful there, so I came here. But then later you find out that I guess he was working in genetics. And so my interpretation of the film is that he was trying to develop a way to impregnate women without sexual intercourse.
Right.
Is that what you were?
Yeah, I mean, generally, he was doing things that he was frowned upon or whatever.
So he was using a monastery as a place to do that because he could use the whole like, oh yeah, born of a virgin and Virgin Mary, like, oh look, it's a miracle. Like it was a logical place for him to conduct his science.
Does it? Okay, so.
But then, yeah, I think to your point, I didn't get the sense that the nuns needed to be involved in this in any way, shape, or form.
Well, other than the fact that they're women.
Right.
So,
but did you understand that he was tricking them into thinking that this was like another Christ-like baby Mother Mary scenario, and that's what got them on board? Or are they also working with his science experiment? Like, to me, that part didn't jive.
Yeah. I don't think everybody was on board. Like everybody knew.
But they are working with him.
Yes, but under false pretenses.
Okay. So
because I think the doctor knows.
Yes.
Or at least you assume the doctor
So there's
knows.
a few of them who have the secret room where they're doing all the science experiments and the genetics. But all the nuns in the convent think that this is the second coming of...
That's the impression I got.
Okay, me too.
I mean, and I don't, I never do this. I contradict myself. I'm curious about how, like, is it a turkey base or like, how did he do that? And when did he do it? Because she was only out for a brief time. So that must have been like she faints or whatever.
And that's what was weird. Like in Rosemary's Baby, like there's an experience where you could foresee that she's being impregnated. Like this is very clear.
Yeah.
But the dream she's having had nothing to do. Like I was totally caught off guard when like, oh, she's pregnant. I'm like, where did that come from?
Totally.
Like there was nothing to indicate that that's where this film is going. And then I feel like it wasn't, maybe we missed it, but I didn't get any, I'm like, how did that happen? When did that happen?
Yeah.
Was it in her drink, in her food? Were they doing it to her in her sleep? There was no procedure. There was nothing she ingested that I could tell. She just was pregnant and apparently had never.
So here's my speculation.
Okay.
So she's talking, so she does her vows. Mm-hmm. She's a novitiate. She does her vows and then they're drinking wine. Mm-hmm. And she excuses herself because she said she's not feeling very well. And then she wanders off. Well, not feeling very well. I think she's emotional about a story she was telling.
That's right.
So she wanders off, washes her face, and then ends up in this chapel kind of thing. And there's somebody on the floor. Correct me if you had a different experience, but there's like somebody on the floor.
Say that again. Where?
Okay, in that little chapel thing where so when she leaves,
I remember she's talking to him. She excuses herself and leaves.
And then she washes her face and she hears something. Mm-hmm. She goes through a couple of doors and she sees this woman.
Oh, yes, 100%.
Lying face down.
With the mask.
With the mask.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's never explained who that woman is or who are the other ones that are wearing masks.
And she's caught by that other nun.
Isn't that the Mother Superior?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the Mother Superior comes in and they have like a holy relic in this chapel, mm-hmm. right? They have one of the nails
in Christ's hand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the Mother Superior takes the nail out of this little, whatever box and shows it to her. But I don't know if you noticed, I did notice that the Mother Superior was wearing gloves, mm-hmm. and so was the priest later, the father. So she's wearing gloves for some reason. I think it's because the father says there's blood and bone and flesh on this. So anyway, they give it to her and she faints.
Mhm.
So I think her drink was doctored. She faints. That's when whatever procedure happened.
Okay. So he spikes her drink. That thing happens. and
That's the
then-
only explanation I can come up with.
So you think she hallucinated seeing the woman on the ground?
No,
No.
I think that woman was there.
Okay, but that's pretty random. It has nothing to do with.
Totally.
Okay, yeah, yeah, that makes sense. So okay, so that's when they do whatever procedure to her, and then she throws up a little whiles later, and they're like, "Oh, have you been with a man?" And she's like, "Nope, nope,
Yeah,
nope."
yeah.
And at first, I'm like, "Well, she just came here from the United States. Like, it's very possible that she's
Absolutely.
lying to you. Why would you believe it?"
Yeah.
And then it makes sense when you realize, oh, they did this to her.
Yes.
So I was like, when you find out she's pregnant and she didn't have sexual intercourse, and I'm like, oh, she's just like a Mother Mary. I thought that was lame. And I was not at that point, like, really? That's what this movie is? And then it got cool again when you realize that they actually
Yeah.
did that to her. So it makes sense.
So Immaculate Conception, if you're not familiar. Okay.
Yeah.
That's where the title comes from.
For sure. And that's cool. I wouldn't have thought that going in.
I did think it might have something to
Okay.
do with that, but I mean, I was also open to other ideas. I mean, I guess the niggle for me is with those characters that are like, you see those characters in the opening sequence.
Mhm.
There's, I think, 4 of them. Almost, because the reason I'm thinking this, sorry, I'll explain what I'm thinking. She talks about Revelation at one point when she's having her confession with the it's not a priest. He's not the father superior. Oh, I don't know why I'm probably this half a glass of beer has messed me up. Okay. Anyway, she's in confession. She talks about Revelation. And I wondered it struck me, I wondered at the beginning if those 4 characters are like the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse kind of thing.
Yeah, that could work for me.
But having said that, those characters are never explained. There's no tradition. There's no hint. There's nothing.
And if they are in fact nuns who falsely believe that there's a new second coming of Christ via birth happening, why would they bury her alive like that just and break her leg? Like, it doesn't make sense what they're doing. And also, I'm not a Bible scholar, but Revelations, like the idea that Christ is being like a baby is being born again of a virgin doesn't really have any biblical significance as far as
I'm aware of either.
So the fact that they're using that as the reason to like get all these nuns on board doesn't make a ton of sense. Because like Jesus comes back. I mean, in Revelations, I think God comes back to earth from wherever, isn't born again from a virgin.
That's my understanding. I mean, I'm not a Bible scholar either. I did read Revelations when I was in high school because it came up in the Seventh Seal, maybe, and a couple of different movies. I thought I better read this just to kind of have my horror, stuff down.
Like if Revelation said, "Oh yeah, there's going to be another baby born of a virgin," then I could see all these nuns like, "Yeah, we need to do this," but it even like from a biblical standpoint doesn't really make sense. So
no,
I think it's easy to pick this film apart if you want to try and.
Yeah, I mean, there's a certain, like many films, right? There's a certain level of disbelief.
And the nuns wearing the red faces, and like that really had nothing to do with anything.
Yeah, I didn't get, and that's the one thing that I would have liked, even just a hint of what's the historical background, what's the story, what's the backstory, just so that we can, like, were they a complementary order? That, you know how sometimes if you watch these kinds of movies, they have like a dark order that's doing stuff. And I wondered, okay, well, is this some throwback to the past? Because the convent's been built on catacombs. I forget who they said it was, Saint somebody.
A saint, yeah.
Saint Jerome or something. So the convent's been built on catacombs. And I wondered, okay, does that have something to do with it? I mean, there's a sequence in the catacombs, but it doesn't really have anything to do.
And that's where I thought there'd be a supernatural element because
Yes.
they're built on the catacombs. And the idea is this monastery was a place for nuns to come and die, right?
Yeah.
So you get senile nuns running around. And so maybe he takes advantage of them because they're not right of mind. Like maybe he tricks these.
Well, I would buy that if there weren't all the young novitiates there too who are looking after the elderly nuns. Like, okay, you could put one by someone maybe who's, got dementia, but all the young ones, I mean, the only evidence you have is that if someone questions, they disappear.
Right.
And maybe that was the scenario at the beginning. Maybe that nun had questioned things and was trying to escape before something happened to her.
Unless she was, because the other thing you realize is that they've been trying to do this procedure with lots of women.
Yeah.
So I thought maybe she was also impregnated and it failed and she was escaping. So it could be.
They don't
scenario.
explain it.
They
right?
don't. Yeah, I guess I didn't quite buy. Like, I get the mad scientist scenario, and they're experimenting on her. That all works. I'm just not sure the motivation of all the nuns to go along with him makes sense.
Yeah, there's a few holes in the story that you like logical, gaps where you go, why would they do that if they know? And why would they do it if they don't? I mean, I guess, not being a person of faith, if you had enough faith, you would just believe, okay, well, I guess this is Immaculate Conception and that's what's going to happen.
But then also, because they've done this multiple times and it's failed multiple times.
Yeah.
Won't these nuns catch on? They're like, oh, this is like the 34th person we've had having a miracle pregnancy.
He talks about 20 years they've been trying this, right?
And maybe that's why the turnover of old senile nuns who are dying and then new young nuns coming in is they don't. Yeah. Maybe he gets a new batch of people that they churn through.
Yeah. Maybe there's no collective memory of what's happened except for the Mother Superior. Doing it. Yeah.
But none of that is really explained. Like we are trying to figure this out, and maybe we sound super confused because when you watch the film, a lot of this stuff is not super well explained. Yeah,
absolutely. It doesn't tell you, okay, well, and I wonder, as we're talking about this, maybe that's a good thing. Like because sometimes movies over-explain.
I agree. I don't mind that.
And so maybe it's not a bad thing to come away with some questions and go, okay, well, I didn't really get that. Does it matter? I don't know. Probably not. Like,
yeah. But like in Hereditary, if you go back and we watch it 10 times, like, oh, okay, like it makes sense now. I can see all the little clues and pieces and put it together. This film, I'm not sure would hold up to that level of scrutiny.
Yeah, that's fair. Because I'm thinking, I mean, we literally just saw it half an hour ago. And if I went back and watched it, are there things that would come out of it? I don't know.
And there could have been, like, to be fair, like, halfway through the film, they do kind of throw your curveball. And you're like, oh, that's what this movie's doing. So if you could watch for clues before that, maybe you would pick up on things that we didn't notice the first time through.
Yeah, fair.
So yeah, but I was kind of pleasantly surprised that it took a very different direction.
Yeah.
And I think her performance makes it all work because she's so good and you're so on board with her and invested in her. And she's so sympathetic, yet likable, but strong. And so her journey, like, even though it maybe doesn't make perfect logical sense, you're pretty invested in her, I feel like.
Okay, there's another little niggle that I have. So considering the third act, I mean, they're in a
third trimester. So the acts, it's the first trimester, second trimester, third trimester, which is kind of clever.
So they're in a rural area, and one of the scenes in the film is them kind of training the novitiates in terms of what they will be doing. And one of them was
wiping butts.
Yes, wiping butts. But I was thinking about the chicken preparing to slaughter chickens, and she couldn't do it. So it came as a bit of surprise to me that in the third act, she's able to bludgeon the Mother Superior, strangle he's not the Pope, but he's like, I guess, an abbot or something.
Like an archbishop or I don't know, something like that, yeah.
Anyway, she strangles him with her rosary and sets the lab on fire.
Now, do you think, though, that's sort of like her character arc? Because when you see what she does at the very end, which we'll talk about in a bit, like she goes from being Like, is that the character development? Like, oh, she goes from not being able to harm this chicken to like,
Yeah.
I've been so affected by this experience. Now I'm willing to like kill the chicken and kill these people and bludgeon the Mother Superior. Like, I just wonder if that was her evolution from completely pure innocence to like the kind of badass final girl.
The other thing that I wondered, and it seems to me that this is how it plays out in the end. I wondered whether she was somehow possessed to do the things that she did.
Like actually like demonically possessed?
Something like that, where she's not in control of her faculties. And as I'm articulating that, I'm thinking, okay, but then why would it let her? Are we okay to spoil the ending?
Yes,
well, we're in the spoiler section. So why would a demon or the devil or whatever let her kill the baby at the end if it was possessing her?
Yeah, I got no sense of anything supernatural happening in this film.
So that's just her kind of losing her shit.
I think so. It's like, actually, I kind of thought of like Spit on Your Grave. Like it kind of reminded me a bit about that, but it's interesting because it's a twist on that because in I Spit on Your Grave, she's raped, correct?
Correct.
So in this case, she is with child, but not through that process, but kind of still functionally because it wasn't by choice.
I was going to say it's still a violation.
Totally. So it's almost, but then she goes and like I Spit on Your Grave goes on a crazy revenge spree.
Yeah. Okay. That's fair. Yeah.
That's sort of how I saw it. Like when I was watching this, like it feels a bit like I Spit on Your Grave, a bit of an interesting twist because she's made to be pregnant by a different means, but still violated. And then she goes on her kind of revenge tour.
And it is, I mean, not to get too biblical on you, but it was definitely the film read to me like in like a lion, out like a lamb, or in like a lamb, out like a lion.
For sure.
Yeah, because she's very innocent and meek. And they use that line over and over again. The meek shall inherit the earth. And then, of
she
course,
was very meek when the film starts.
Absolutely. Yeah. She's very meek at the beginning. And then just those series of injustices and the things that she experiences and sees and witnesses kind of put her over the edge.
That's how I read it.
Yeah. Okay.
And did you I feel like they're almost going for like a birth metaphor at the end when she's crawling through the tunnel.
Oh yeah.
And she comes out into the light.
Absolutely.
And then ironically, then she gives birth.
Yes.
But then, and I was like, is she going to kill it? Is she going to kill it? And it seemed like she wasn't going to do it. And then she goes over and grabs the rock. I'm like, yeah, she's going to do it. Just because I feel like that's the right response.
You're a sick and twisted individual.
Well,
you were wanting her to kill the baby?
But you could tell as soon as the baby started making noises, it was not a natural sounding baby.
This is something I think they did. I appreciated what they did because
they don't show it.
They don't show it.
Yeah.
There's a wide shot when she goes to get the rock or the whatever. You can see the baby in the background, kind of bloody and whatever, but it's not doing any of the typical, kind of howling. It seems quite content to just kind of lie and, the two words that come to my mind are mewling and puking, even though it's not, puking. But I really appreciated how they did that, where they didn't focus in. You didn't get to see some CGI thing or some like bad doll with, ketchup on it. It was just, and we mentioned the body horror. But there are some like just
I cringed a few times.
Yeah.
The fingernail thing.
I saw you cringing on that one. That didn't bug me as much as her biting through the umbilical cord.
Oh yeah, that was pretty gross.
Oh gosh.
And the tongue cut off too. I thought was really gross.
That was a great scene actually with that. It's quite an old-fashioned implement where they kind of grab her tongue with these two iron tongs and then pull it out and
it's like getting your tongue pierced.
Yikes.
And it reminded me a bit of Mia Goth's performance at the end of Maxine, where she has to do that awkward, like smiling. So there's kind of an extended shot of her like kind of screaming as she's giving birth.
Yeah, that was really good.
Linger on her for a long time, and it could have been really awkward, but she pulls it off and it ends up being quite impactful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that scene could have been problematic if the actress wasn't as good.
Agreed.
Because it is quite a lingering scene on her face.
Yeah.
And it's really well done.
Because if the baby, like there's that typical in every film when a baby's born, it makes the kind of crying sound.
Yeah.
But this one had a very different
quality
to it. So you're like, this is
Yeah.
not like a human baby.
No.
And I guess this is never explained whether it is meant to be a supernatural thing being born or whether this was just another botched experiment and whatever is coming out is not what was intended.
So is your understanding the same as mine that the relic from the crucifixion of Christ, he claims that there was, he doesn't use the word DNA, but he said there was blood and flesh and bone on this nail. So is your takeaway that him being a biologist and a scientist, that he was able to like CRISPR that stuff and take it off the nail? Is that what they're impregnating her with?
Oh, that would make
DNA
sense.
from
Christ?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
That was the reading that I had, was because what else are they impregnating her with if it's supposed to be immaculate?
Yeah. See, that's something, again, they don't explain it.
No.
But that would make sense to me. And this nail is really important. Like it shows up in the film like 10 times. It is used to kill a villain at the end. So maybe it was foreshadowing, but that would make sense to me.
That's the only, otherwise, how are you expling that
they
it's
need a
immaculate?
little like Jurassic Park, like Mr. DNA video explaining how this is all going to work.
Totally.
That would have taken us out of the film a little bit. But.
Maybe. I think as we mentioned before the spoiler section, this was, I felt a pretty solid film. There are some gaps. There are some things that you go, well, I kind of like this part to be explained. But in terms of, if you're willing to suspend that disbelief and go, okay, well, I don't need everything explained, the arc of the story is enough, maybe.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that was their intent? Like, we want to purposefully hold back details and make the audience work, but maybe they held too much back to where it maybe didn't make enough sense?
I can only imagine that's the thinking, because either the script writers didn't know how to weave in those elements to the story.
Yeah.
Or let's give them the benefit of the doubt and say, yeah, they understood what those elements were, but they didn't want to burden the story with those. Like they stuck very closely to her arc and the everything else was kind of peripheral.
Yeah, because I do feel like there's some like passion and there's some love for this film being when they're making it. Yeah. Like this is not hey, let's just churn out a horror film for the box office. Like it's not like
it's
The
thoughtful.
Nun or The Nun 2.
Yeah.
Like you could tell the people working on this were trying to make something elevated or something kind of special and maybe didn't quite pull it off. So I appreciated that because I do think some of these things we're talking about were things they were trying to accomplish, but maybe they just didn't quite land it.
If you reach for the moon, you'll land among the stars.
That's right. And they kind of do. I think that's sort of what happened.
Yeah, I think so. I do feel like it's, the story is pretty good. I could have done without the jump scares because I find those are always pretty cheap, but I get, kind of what they were doing.
So were you not expecting supernatural? I just feel like whenever I see nuns and Catholic priests, I'm just waiting for kind of the demonic possession angle.
That's kind of where I expected the story to go.
Especially when they said it was built on this, like
absolutely. And when they said
catacombs
that, she was pregnant or whatever, and she begins to question the origin of the child, whether it's holy or demonic. And I didn't quite catch, when the picture doesn't fall, but kind of hangs askew. And then there's a biblical.
Yes.
Now, interesting again, I think it's in Latin or Italian, but they don't translate it for you. But she goes to the Bible and looks up a verse. But again, other than kind of focusing on the word Satan, I didn't get much from that scene. Like what was that passage in the Bible supposed to be telling us?
Yeah, I think it was Corinthians maybe was the book.
That's what I thought,
from. She said it pretty quickly, like you'd have to go back. There was a sentence there.
There is. I think it was that Satan could, I think this is when she questions her own pregnancy, that Satan could act like the bringer of light or something like that. I don't know if I've got the wording right there, but it was definitely something about deception and Satan and that he could appear to be something that he's not.
Yeah. I think that makes sense.
And that was, I can't remember that I mentioned it before the spoiler section. That was the other film that I watched, was actually set not in Italy, but in this really remote location. And it was a woman who supposedly was immaculately had conceived. So she's carrying a baby, and you find out that they are doing some experiments or whatever, but she escapes with, can't remember who the guy is that escapes with her, but they end up running off together. And at the end, he thinks about killing the baby, but doesn't.
Oh, interesting.
So it's kind of like a Rosemary's Baby ending where the baby and the two people end up raising, like that's the impression you get. And I wish I could remember the name, but very similar. I mean, she's a foreign, she's not American, but she's foreign. She's pregnant. She kind of gets treated differently and special.
This is ringing a bell.
I can't, I want to say it's like The Devil Among Us or something like that, but that's not it. And
Devil Inside?
It might be that.
Yeah.
Devil Inside.
I'd be curious to hear interviews with the director or the producers or whatever to see if they were drawing influences from particular films, because I think you and I have already referenced 5 or 6 movies that maybe it drew some influence
That would be
from.
interesting, actually. Yeah.
And almost a bit of Suspiria vibes too, maybe just being like in Europe with women in a, like it's not quite, there's no witches or anything, but it just gave me slight Suspiria vibes at one point.
And what was the other one that reminded me of was, because again, it takes place in a convent. There's no pregnancy. Shoot, what's it called? It's recent, like 2022 maybe, or 2023. Anyway, can't remember. Almost done the beer, so memories out the window. That's, I think, all I have to say.
Yeah, I think we ran through most of it. Yeah, the more I talk about it, the more I think I appreciate it.
There you go.
But I do think it's too bad I don't know. We'd have to go back and watch it again, see if they can tie those things together. But I do feel like the evil nuns with the mask don't quite jive with the mad genetic scientists.
I didn't really get the connection. Like I said, I think they're like a complementary order or something that's my sense of having watched lots of these films, that, maybe there's something going on with those nuns, that they're part of a historic order or a separate order that works. I don't know. Or maybe the biologist controlled them, or I don't know.
Did you like the ending then?
Yeah, I pretty much saw it coming.
Yeah.
Just because of how they framed it, and you never saw the child. And I thought, okay, they're going to off this kid. And it's pretty, I mean, I can imagine them taking some heat for that one, because whenever you kill a kid, especially a newborn baby.
I think that's why I appreciate they
went there. Yeah.
Yeah, they went there. Because I thought, oh, most movies aren't going to go there.
And so it'd be interesting to see because this is a fairly recent release. It'll be interesting to see if there's some kickback.
Yeah.
As it goes through its release. I mean,
it just goes against every motherly instinct.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that was neat. Any chance this makes your top 10, do you think, of the year?
It's hard to say, because there's some bangers coming out this year.
I was going to say maybe in other years, but I think in this year, probably not. Although her performance was very good.
There's Blood and Honey 2. So
that's right. That's easily number 1.
Easily number 1.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's what's on the like Terrifier's coming out this year.
Nosferatu. There's that Aliens one, looks really good.
Is that what's the name of that one? The Aliens one. Anyway, yeah, I mean, and as we've talked about on previous episodes, it seems like the second half of the year is pretty stacked.
Yeah, Triple X from the Maxine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think kind of like from May, June, right through to Halloween is going to be.
It's been a slow start, but it seems like already.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I've found myself with a copy of Night Swim and Lisa Frankenstein. I haven't watched either of those, and partly because I think they're going to suck. So I'm kind of holding off. It's like, okay, I know they're 2024. I know I should watch them, but I can't bring myself to do it. Especially Lisa Frankenstein. That's just a stupid name. Like
Yeah, neither of those appeals to me. That's
Yeah.
why I was curious to go see this one, because it's the first movie that came out this year that I think looked promising.
Yeah, it's a good call. I mean, it's a good one to see in the theaters, and it was a good one to see first. Maybe that broke the ice for me. Maybe now I can see Night Swim
Go watch
and
Night
Lisa
Swim.
Frankenstein.
Yeah, it'll probably be better than those.
Okay, there you
All
go.
right. Well, thanks for tuning in to our special Thrilling Theater episode. And
Thrilling Theater. Yeah, so this is a bonus. So don't forget to stay tuned for our regular ones. In April, we have Mandy and Misery coming
right.
up. And we still don't know what we're doing for May, but you'll know when we know.
It might be Blood and Honey too. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
Okay.
All right.
See you in the aisles.